Thank you so much, Victoria, for having me. Can everyone hear me okay? I'm okay? Okay. I'm Helen Supanich. I am one of the 3 shift supervisors at the Department of Justice's National Elder Fraud Hotline. We launched on March 3rd of this year, so we're relatively new. Um, so yeah, this is just basically a relatively quick overview of our hotline, and we hope that it can be a useful resource for you all. And your clients, you're welcome to refer them to us. So we'll get started. Next slide, please. Alrighty, so just some basics on the hotline. So the US DOJ's National Elder Fraud Hotline, which is managed by OVC, the Office for Victims of Crime, provides services to all adults age 60 and older who may be victims of financial fraud. The hotline is staffed by experienced case managers who provide personalized support to callers. While the hotline does not serve in an investigatory capacity, so we don't investigate, case managers assist callers with reporting the suspected fraud to the relevant agencies and by providing resources and referrals to other appropriate services as needed case by case. When appropriate, case managers will complete a complaint form with the FBI's IC3 or Internet Crime Complaint Center, which is for internet facilitated crimes. And case managers at the hotline also help our callers submit a consumer complaint to the Federal Trade Commission. So we can actually fill out those IC3 and FTC complaints on behalf of our callers. Our phone number is pretty easy to remember. It's 833-FRAUD-11, which translates to 833-372-8311. Our hours of operation are 6 to 11 Eastern time, 7 days a week, so we have very extensive hours. Always have a case manager on staff. And our website is justice.gov/stop-elder-fraud. Next slide, please. So again, just basics on what we do. Hotline staff provide guidance and appropriate resources, investigatory channels, etc., that are tailored to the type or types of fraud being reported to us. Our case managers, which the calls are transferred to as needed, provide warm handoffs to resources and referrals if requested, if desired. And again, like I mentioned, also assist with filing complaints as appropriate to the situation. We can do warm handoffs even to law enforcement or local resources, things of that nature. Next slide, please. Okay, so common fraud and scams we see at the hotline. So lots and lots and lots of phone scams, right? As you, I'm sure, won't be surprised to hear, I'm sure all of us receive these all the time. Government impersonation, so government imposter, probably the most common type we see. Those grandparent scam calls are common as well. So the government imposter ones, might be impersonating the Social Security Administration, US Marshals, IRS, FBI, etc. So we also see, of course, lots of internet scams perpetrated via email, Facebook, dating sites, etc. One example is a ransomware scam email that threatens to blackmail the recipient unless Bitcoin funds are sent. There was a trend of that for a while. Of course, we see, unfortunately, a lot of romance scams, which are really devastating, most commonly perpetrated via dating sites initially, or maybe Facebook. Identity theft comes up a lot, a lot of times it's coupled with another type of scam or fraud because there's a potential for identity theft. It opens folks up to having their identity stolen when they give information to a scammer, like obviously like a social security number or what have you. For instance, a government imposter scam call might end up opening someone up to identity theft because, again, the victim gives an SSN or other really sensitive information. So that comes up, by itself. Identity fraud, theft comes up by itself, and also in the context of other types of scams and frauds. So we also do see, of course, those calls with regard to fraud perpetrated by someone known to and trusted by the victim. Those are quite difficult. I feel like they're underrepresented at the hotline, but we definitely see those as well. And of course, again, for all of these, we would provide guidance as to next steps, how to handle the situation and appropriate resources, investigatory and non-investigatory channels, again, tailored to the type of fraud being reported. And again, we do provide those warm handoffs as well. Next slide, please. So here's some common questions that we've received with regard to the hotline. Next slide. Okay, can a victim remain anonymous when calling the hotline? Yes. So even if it's not a victim, any caller who calls us can remain anonymous if they so choose. If they're comfortable providing their basic contact information, we collect that to assist in identifying local resources and to assist with reporting as needed. Next slide, please. So what's the referral process for the hotline? So we get, of course, referrals to the hotline. So you folks could refer clients to us. You know, professionals who work with individuals who may need our assistance may provide our information to victims. Of course, then as alluded to, we also make referrals from the hotline. So the referrals we provide our callers vary based on the circumstances and the resources identified by our team to assist the caller. We offer, again, warm transfers, or we can just provide folks with contact information for the appropriate resources, reporting channels, etc. Sometimes folks just prefer to contact them on their own. Next slide, please. So can other organizations list the hotline on their resource list? Yes, you folks absolutely can. We definitely encourage others to list us as a resource by providing our number and or looking to our webpage. We also on our website have these widgets, which are basically digital artwork, which are available for any organization that may want to link to us via their websites. And the widgets can be found at this link that's in the slide. And I will also paste that in the chat as well. Give me one sec. There we go. Okay, next slide, please. So what materials and resources are available to disseminate to older adults, the public, and professionals to spread awareness about elder fraud? So the Department of Justice's website has a section for its Elder Justice Initiative, which has example scenarios of all types of elder abuse, including a section on financial exploitation, which includes screening questions to determine whether an older adult might be experiencing financial exploitation. It has financial exploitation warning signs and information on where to report it. Another good resource is the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau's website, CFPB. It includes a resource guide for elder financial exploitation prevention and response networks. It's a resource guide for professionals, not the public necessarily, which proposes that professionals start a network, like a multidisciplinary team, in order to combat financial exploitation of older adults. It has lots of links to other great resources as well. AARP, of course, well known to be a very good source of information. Their website has a lot of great stuff on it. The website targets older adults, targets the public. For instance, it includes tips to avoid scams and fraud. You can sign up for its fraud alerts via text message. It's got its own helpline. AARP even has a database where it compiles scams and generates a map that shows where reported scams are occurring. The Federal Trade Commission, FTC, has a great website, tons of information on it as well. The Pass It On feature, which targets consumers and encourages folks to share what they know about scams with friends and family. Lots of stuff on the FTC website. So what are some other methods that are available to those wanting to spread awareness / information pertaining to elder fraud? So again, you know, the DOJ, I'm sorry. So other methods might be presentations at senior centers, recreation centers, etc. You know, you can disseminate flyers and other materials, really, you know, straightforward stuff. You can put on professional trainings, webinars, etc., developing resource list materials geared toward professionals. You know, everything you'd expect. I'm sure you folks know this. Okay. Alrighty, next slide, please. So what advocacy, this question has come up a lot for us, can one provide to aid an older victim of financial abuse? The Taking Action Guide is really an excellent place to start. It's got step-by-step stuff in it. Additionally, 2 organizations have resources you may find of value to advocate on behalf of an older victim of financial abuse. They are the National Center on Law and Elder Rights, NCLER, and the National Center on Elder Abuse, NCEA. I can also post these links in the chat. That would help. If it'll let me. One moment, please. There we go.
Helen, while you do that, I'm going to launch the poll and see how
Perfect.
people are familiar with your organization. So let's see, polls. Okay, continue. And the next one, let's see, hang on, and polling. So this poll is, are you aware of the National Elder Fraud Hotline? And if you can take a minute and complete that poll, I think it's great to know how many people here in Vermont are using your resource. So you can go ahead, Helen, while they take that poll.
Okay, great. Thank you. I'm excited to see the results. Okay, actually, we can proceed to the next slide, please. Okay, so another question that comes up a lot for us is, how do we help older adults when they voluntarily send large sums of money to scammers? For instance, this comes up a lot in romance scams, lottery scams. So really, it has to be a very careful approach, really kind of tailored to the individual. Empathy and sort of showing a non-judgmental support are super, super important. If we've gauged that the victim will be open to it and we build adequate rapport, we can gently but firmly explain that this is a scam, and we can, have supporting examples, show them some literature on it, or other folks' stories as needed. But again, you have to kind of get to the point where you feel like the person is ready to hear it, open to hear it, and it won't be counterproductive. So, rapport and trust building, again, is super important. You want a really gentle, tailored approach to discussing it. So if, at the hotline, if we have someone calling in on behalf of the victim, like a loved one who's very concerned about someone being enmeshed with a romance scam or something of that nature, we educate them about the scam and provide them with the appropriate resources and guidance that they can sort of use to assist their loved one. So it's going to be, for instance, a lot of reporting to the IC3 and FTC, which again, we do assist with. We would recommend that they have a really, a frank discussion with the victim, again, tailoring it to the victim's readiness, to their own personality, to the situation. And if the victim is willing, the family member can help them report the fraud to the local authorities, to the victim's financial institutions. Our case managers, again, can also assist the caller, even if it's a third-party caller, so someone calling on behalf of the victim. We can still assist those callers with completing the IC3 and FTC complaints on the victim's behalf without involving the victim when appropriate. So if we have a son calling in, we can actually assist the son in completing those complaints on behalf of, basically his mother, let's say, who's become enmeshed with a scammer. So if a victim calls in, who's again voluntarily sending money, it's a sticky situation. If they're open to the fact that it might not be on the up and up, that it might be a scam, and they're willing to take some steps, of course we would offer the victim, we'd offer to assist the victim with the IC3 and FTC complaints, as always. Again, same advice, we would offer the victim to contact their banks if they wired money. Again, depending on the situation, if they maybe sent gift cards, that's a different story. We can also offer a warm handoff to their bank, local law enforcement as appropriate. And we definitely, have a focus at the hotline on offering emotional support. and referring callers to other resources depending on the situation. So maybe some counseling, case management, friendly visitors, romance scams and things of that nature can be really emotionally devastating for these folks who get involved. So I think sometimes the focus is really on more emotional recovery. And so we definitely provide that support and also refer them out as needed. We're not counselors, obviously, at the hotline, so we definitely have to refer out sometimes. Okay.
Helen, it looks
Let's
like you have a question in the chat,
Sure.
if you don't mind.
Okay. Okay. Question from Ted Hobson with the Consumer Assistance Program. Is there a list of resources from law enforcement to take down scam websites and other internet scam sites? Ooh, that's a great question. I'm not aware of that, but I love that. I will pass that along to my team, but not as far as I'm aware. Thank you for the question. One moment.
And I'll encourage, while we get to the next slide, everyone, please do put your questions for Helen in the chat area, because we have built in time for her to answer questions today.
Excellent. Thank you so much. All right, so let's go on to the next slide. Okay. So sort of related to the previous slide. So what's the best approach for trying to assist an older adult who does not believe that she is a victim of a scam or a fraud? So once more, as I've mentioned a whole lot, it's the rapport building, empathy, careful approach, tailoring your approach to their readiness to talk about it if they really are in that denial place, right? So we're talking about they still think that this person, this romance scammer is the love of their life, what have you. It's going to be really balancing, just maybe starting off with more of the empathy and, really kind of try to get into their headspace. Think about the level of isolation that I think a lot of these people are suffering from. They may not talk to anybody but the scammer for days on end. It's kind of hard to imagine, but I think that is why these scams are so successful and so really suck people in. And it's sometimes helpful to just sort of really try to empathize and get in their headspace, especially with the level of isolation they're experiencing. And scammers can be really relentless. We're talking day in, day out, constant contact. So this is the only person maybe checking in on the victim. So that is really kind of a big wall to get over, right? So that's a place to start from, the empathy. So again, it's just like I said, tailoring your approach to the victim's openness and willingness to admit that something might be amiss, just little dipping your toe in that water, just kind of getting a feel for where their head's at, gently asking questions or suggesting that maybe something might not be on the up and up. It's gentle, but you also want to use firm language, and it's a very delicate balance, and we try to strike it at the hotline with these calls. And you want to, validate and normalize the victim's experience and explain how sophisticated and manipulative professional scammers and fraudsters are. I mean, they're literally career con artists. They're professionals at what they do. And often part of organized crime syndicates. So this is, no small potatoes. We tell our callers all the time not to beat themselves up. It's these are very savvy con artists essentially, and they catch people off guard early in the morning. Sometimes it's really just a perfect storm. So we try to focus on that sort of validating of their experience, that it's understandable, right? And once you build that rapport and trust, you can report to agencies. You can suggest gently, okay, well, let's, now that we're thinking this might not be on the up and up, where do we report? So again, that's going to be usually the Federal Trade Commission, IC3, maybe even APS, et cetera. And third parties can make these reports on someone else's behalf. So again, it's really going to be tailored to the situation. But the isolation is a huge factor for sure. Okay, I'm seeing a couple questions in the chat. Are there printed brochures available for distribution to agencies and organizations serving elders? I think in a previous slide, I gave a couple of resources. At the end, there's going to be a slide with resources again, so I will paste that into the chat too. Elliot Greenblatt says, at AARP Fraud Watch, we frequently deal with people who insist that they are too smart to be scammed. Yes, there's a lot of roadblocks in that regard. It's really difficult. it just, I think honestly, part of it is it really just takes time. It's not necessarily one conversation with the victim where we successfully get through all those steps of convincing them it's a scam, providing empathy, building rapport. I think it takes a long time. It takes multiple conversations, just how it takes a long time for scammers to really get into their lives. And it's like they have all the time in the world to scam them. It's day in, day out. It can take time and finessing as well for someone trying to advocate for someone who's been scammed. I think that's one of the hardest things as well. I have another question. Do you provide written materials to elders that are easy to see, i.e. bigger font, and include resources for those elders who do not feel comfortable or even have access to the internet? Yes, that's a great question. So we do direct the older adults that we work with to the Federal Trade Commission website and all those previously mentioned resources that I'll send again at the end of the presentation. However, yes, some of our callers do not have access to the internet or feel comfortable using it. So that is a really good question. So we don't send out, mail out written materials. The hotline does not, but I really think that you're onto something there. That's something that I will pass along to my team as an idea, because you're absolutely right that it does come up a lot that folks are not comfortable using the internet. We do direct folks to work with a loved one who might be more comfortable with the internet, but we realize that may not be doable for everyone because folks really are quite isolated a lot of the time. So that is a great question. Okay. Yes, the biggest weakness for seniors who are pulled in on emotion, putting you under the ether. Absolutely. It's so difficult to surmount that. How can you, again, it takes time. It takes time for sure. And I'm not here to say that there's any easy answer. Absolutely. These are very devastating and difficult situations, especially with the romance scams and maybe the lottery scams where they're really, really enmeshed and it's been going on for a long time. And there's a lot of shame around it too. So the victims oftentimes don't even really want to admit to family that it's happening, or they downplay it. So that's another roadblock. So again, it's just that little by little chipping away, building rapport over time that can help. But it is quite difficult. Let's go on to the next slide. We're going to switch gears a little bit to
Helen, there's one
yes.
question in the question and answer field, and I'll get us to the next slide if you have a chance to look at that. Thank you.
Thank you. I see it now. Okay, this question comes from Sherry Rockcastle. Banks are often the first line of witness identification of romance scams. Yes, they don't have time to ease into the topic where they want or need to avoid a cash withdrawal. What best resource would you recommend the banker reach out to concerning? I would say you're asking, I guess, the best resource for the bank to suggest that the victim reach out to really go into the conversation more deeply about this might possibly being a scam. I mean, they can definitely call us. I think that we would be a great first resource. We actually the hotline loves when people call us first, because then we can really shine. We can give them all that guidance. We can fill out those forms for them if they'd like. We can, we can make those warm handoffs even to law enforcement. We can go the whole 9 yards, pull out all the stops, help them call their banks, talk about how to address any possible identity theft. We'd be a good first resource because we can really take that time and go through step by step. And we do make follow-up calls to our callers to see if they need further assistance, to see how all the reporting is going, to see how the process is going, and to check in as well. And you're very welcome. Okay, so next slide. So like I said, we're going to switch gears, and these are some hotline success stories. So here's some example calls that came into the hotline where we felt like we were really able to shine and they had some really good outcomes. So we'll dive in. So the first, so case number 1. So this caller who called us, he was defrauded while visiting the US Virgin Islands in the course of a cruise. So he got off at on St. Thomas Island, I think on a cruise. So he was not on the ship. He was pressured into purchasing some jewelry, and he signed a really dubious contract to purchase this jewelry. They convinced him that it was worth X amount of dollars. It turned out when he looked into it that, of course, the jewelry was not worth nearly what they claimed that it was. It was far less valuable than he was led to believe. The fraudsters actually were really brazen. They opened up lines of credit in his name. I guess they used his signature. They made at least one unauthorized charge that, out of the blue he found out about, and they actually forged his signature on a credit card slip. So it was really not just the jewelry, they really were quite brazen. So he called us and he was obviously, quite upset about this. He was transferred to one of our case managers. He was assisted with the Federal Trade Commission complaint. The case manager completed it on his behalf. And we looked up the numbers for the US Virgin Islands Department of Licensing and Consumer Affairs so he could make a local consumer complaint there. And we also looked up, there's actually a US Attorney General in the US Virgin Islands. This caller shared that he tried to call local law enforcement on the island, but they said that he actually would need to come in person to make a report, which was not doable since he had returned to the States. So we did connect him with the Attorney General there. So our case manager made a follow-up call to him, as we do, and he shared that he had submitted documentation to the US Virgin Islands Attorney General, who was considering taking his case. He confirmed he'd also reach out to the local consumer affairs office there, and he was satisfied with our assistance and our ability to connect him to these resources. So that was a success story. Case number 2. So this caller called in to report that there's a large-scale fraud ring in a particular state or area that's targeting older adults' estates. So it's really like large scale. So it involves numerous professionals, attorneys, doctors, et cetera, all in cahoots. For this type of call, we would refer to the DOJ switchboard and also the local FBI field office in the area where this ring is happening, and the US Attorney's office in the area as well. So we gave those to caller. He called us back out of the blue just to let us know he was very happy, to inform us that he spoke with the FBI per our suggestion, and they stated that they're looking into the matter due to its large scope. He felt really empowered by having a case number with us. Now, again, we don't investigate, but we do provide like a reference number, a case number for our calls. So he provided this case number, and he felt that it lended legitimacy when he reached out to those resources, and he felt that it was a really great system and was really appreciative of us. So we got some really great feedback on that call. So example number 3, this caller was targeted by a Publishers Clearinghouse lottery phone scam. She sent money via gift cards and cash advance. She reported the fraud to her banks and her local law enforcement. She was assisted. We completed the Federal Trade Commission complaint for her. And when we followed up with her, she shared that the FBI actually reached out to her local law enforcement to inform them that the FBI is actually handling this investigation of this lottery fraud ring. And she shared such a good thing to hear from a caller. She said she now feels like herself again. So that was another really great outcome for one of our calls. We wish they could all be like these. Next slide, please.
Right, just a moment. Whenever I look at chat, I have to kind of start over, so just bear with me one second.
No problem. I can look at the chat as well. Please promote that. Okay. Elliot noted. Thank you. Okay, one moment. I'm sorry. I'm just noting this. Okay. So ongoing activities in terms of what's the hotline up to? What are we working on? So we are working on outreach to other national, state, and local organizations serving older adults. Presentations like this one today. Working on a marketing campaign. We have PSAs that are forthcoming. As previously mentioned, we do have widgets available on our website. I sent the link in the chat. So you folks we would love for you folks to add them to your websites or your e-communications, your social media, what have you. That's a great way to promote the hotline. We would appreciate that. We're working on more content for our website and resources that we're actually going to include on our website directly so that our website can also be a resource for everybody, for you folks, for older adults. Please help spread the word. We appreciate it so very much. It's invaluable. And then the next slide is just the resources that I've been mentioning throughout. So I will again paste those into the chats if it will let me.
And Helen, while you do that, I'm going to encourage people to ask questions as we get to the end of your slides, that this is a terrific opportunity to ask you questions and get any additional information they can think of.
And the next slide is the last slide. So thank you all so much. if a question was not addressed, we'll do questions right now, but we can also accept your questions via email, which I will also paste in the chat. Actually, I'll just type it in. So if it doesn't get answered today, we encourage you to email us as well. And our email is, there we go. Oops, I'm sorry. I apologize for the typo. There we go. I'm ready for questions.
Looks like we have some in the chat field again.
I don't see them. I don't see any questions. Are there new ones?
Let me have a look. I will start my video again. So it's not, let's see. Maybe you answered them all. Let's check the Q&A section. Okay. Oh, it was your chat that I was.
I sent the resources.
Great.
I really liked the question about, what resources are available for older adults who may not be comfortable with the internet. I think that's such a good point you bring up. There's a lot of roadblocks there. I'm definitely going to pass that along to my team. Thank you for that. It's invaluable.
I'm going to look at the poll, which says that 42% had been aware of the Elder Fraud Hotline, but 58% had not been.
We haven't done any marketing yet, so I'm actually surprised it's that high. That's good.
Good.
We had, press release and a couple of mentions, but news mentions, but interesting. Thank you.
You're welcome. We have one more poll that we can do, and this question is, the question is, one of them, I'm going to launch it. It's a two-part question. Would you recommend someone to call the National Elder Fraud Hotline is question number one. And the second, if you would not recommend that someone call, why not? So, so that is open. As we in Vermont work to share all of our resources far and wide, I think educating people about your resource is so important. And our speaker, Debbie Dean, who's our afternoon keynote, just says that her passion is romance scams and preventing and addressing the needs of victims of romance scams. And her take-home message when we spoke was call the National Fraud Help Hotline. It was just very simple. And so it's wonderful to know that. How many calls are you getting? How kind of have calls increased since your launch?
Oh, great question. So we probably get about 500 calls a month on average. Yeah, that's an average. It definitely varies a lot by day to day.
And have you seen an increase in calls during the time of COVID?
We launched on March 3rd, so we've pretty much only existed in the time of COVID. It's kind of an interesting time to launch, right? We obviously noticed big rushes after we're mentioned in the news or something of that nature. Besides that, it's really all over the board.
Elliot commented about needing choice number 3. We're not able to do that in this live environment, so thank you for noting that. So you can answer the poll as best you can, and maybe it's unanswerable at this point if it feels incomplete. So let's see, any other questions? Oh, there is a question in the question field. Do you see that?
Yes. Can a bank call on behalf of their customer, or is it best to convince the customer to call? Oh, I like that question. A bank can definitely call. anyone can call. Just to clarify, I think I touched on it, but it kind of might have gotten buried. So anybody can call the hotline to get our guidance, to find out what resources, what reporting channels we would recommend. Like I said, our case managers can also fill out those IC3 and FTC forms on behalf of a third party who's calling in regarding their loved one being defrauded. So a bank can definitely call, and we would give them basically the same guidance and suggest the same resources and reporting channels that we would suggest to the victim. So that certainly works. But we would also definitely encourage them as well to have the victim call us, because it's good to work directly with the victim in terms of providing that emotional support, that guidance. Coming straight from the victim, the reports might be more detailed, and brings up a good question. I'm not sure if we've ever done, or if we would do, an FTC or an IC3 form for a bank. That has not come up, but definitely, like I said, a bank can call on behalf, but we would also encourage them to have the victim call as well. We would encourage them to give the victim our number as a starting point. So again, we can go through that process of making all those suggestions of next steps, providing that emotional support, which is so important, reporting to the correct channels if they're ready, as needed, as appropriate. And we do offer follow-up calls. Our case managers follow up with the victims as well, the clients as well. So that's helpful, just to check in and see how everything is transpiring.
Okay. I am not seeing any more questions. There are some user, poll errors. So, we'll see. Unfortunately, since we're live, I can't correct those errors. So lesson learned. And I guess any other questions before we sign off for the last session with Helen? Well, I want to thank you, Helen, for making yourself available and sharing this valuable information. I know I've learned a lot.
Good.
Yeah, it's great. This session has been recorded, and so any attendee can use it. In addition, I will encourage everyone to join us this afternoon. There is a separate link, but you can register and join for as much or as little as you would like. But I think it's terrific that we have this opportunity to meet virtually, and then to join those sessions that are most important to us. So we got some thanks. Yeah. And again, Helen's slides are available in the Google Drive that was shared earlier. We'll share it again. And this is recorded for if you'd like to share it with your colleagues. So again, Helen, many, many thanks. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. And you're very welcome.
Great. And
I look forward to getting referrals from you all.
Yes, I'm sure they're coming. So that's terrific.
And again, it can be the victim or a third party too. We would welcome any calls. Absolutely. Thank you.